We win Texas, and it all changes. That's why between now and March the 4th is an incredibly important time, not just for Texas, but for this country. And let me explain why. I have nothing but great respect for Senator McCain. I think it's in fact noteworthy that the two most civil campaigns in the entire Republican primary are the only two still on their feet, and that ought to say something about the civil discourse that we have had, and that's good. But I believe voters, not just in Texas but in the rest of the country, ought to have a choice. You ought to be able to express your voice. And if you don't get to vote because the game is already ended before you even get to go play in it, then what does that say about the process if we dismiss the voters of the largest Republican state in America before they even have a chance to go and express themselves? And so when I get asked by these national media people, why are you still in this race? You know, I remembered something about Texas. You guys do have an independent streak in you, by golly. And boy, am I loving it right now. Because I don't think a whole lot of people in Texas cotton up a whole lot to having somebody in Washington sit there on television telling them how they're going to vote. And I've never known Texas people to say, let's see what the people of New York want us to do. Nothing against the people of New York, but it's just that Texans have an independent streak in them, and they kind of want to think for themselves. And let me tell you what I believe about the people of Texas, because I've not just lived here, but I lived 10 years in Texarkana right on the border. So I live literally 8 blocks from the state. Brother, don't push my luck now, okay? One of the things I realize is that Texas people are Republican because they're conservative. And they're Republican and conservative because they're principled and have convictions. An election for most people in Texas is not about the politics, it's about the principles they believe in. People of Texas know we have broken borders. People in Texas know that we've got to seal and control our borders. We're the only country on the face of the earth that does not have control of its own borders. It's a matter of national security. It's a matter of common sense. And I'm the only candidate left in this race who says we will seal the borders. And it's not because we don't want people to come here. There's not been a state in this country that has been more welcoming to immigrants than Texas has. Nobody has done a better job of being open-minded, open-hearted when it comes to people coming to this country than the state of Texas and the people of Texas. But the people of Texas, like the people of the rest of America, believe that if you come, you should come to the front door and sign the guest book. That we don't mind you coming, but that it ought to be through a legal process. And the people of Texas, like the people of the rest of America, understand that it ought not to be more difficult and you have to have more documentation to get on an airplane at DFW Airport than you have to cross an international border. We want law. We want something to be done that makes it so that when people do come here, they do it under the law and do it the right way. That's all. And nobody else has a plan to fix it. I do. And I promise you that we'll have a secure border, we'll have a tough but a fair policy, and we won't allow the federal government to continue its dysfunctional inability to deal with an issue that has really become increasingly challenging for communities and schools. And the fact is, we get on our knees every night in this country, and thank God we do live in a country people are trying to break into, and it's not a country they're trying to break out of, and that's a good thing. But the Republican Party platform of Texas says it right when it comes to things like amnesty and letting people break line. Folks, you don't break line getting into a Cowboy game, you don't break line going to a Rangers game, and you don't break line getting into this country, because the Texas Republican Party philosophy is amnesty, no way, no how, not any time. And that's what we're simply saying, is that we'll do it by the law, we'll get in line, and everybody will get a turn. But it'll be done the right way, so that no one lives in this country with his head down, nobody lives in darkness, everybody lives with his head held up, and that's best for everyone. Everyone. I'm staying in this race also because I believe that some issues transcend all of our politics. And let me describe one that I believe this country had better be right on. And that's the protection of innocent human life. Our founding fathers, when those 56 incredibly brave dissenters signed their names to the Declaration of Independence, put their lives on the line when they said these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want you to think through what they were saying. That all of us are equal. And those were radical words in 1776, because they lived in a time when you were who you were because of your ancestry or last name or the job that you held within the community or your bloodline or your educational level. And for them to say, nope, that's not the way it works. Everybody has the same basic intrinsic value and worth, because that worth doesn't come from what you do or what you are. That worth comes from the God who created you and gave it to you. You are endowed by your Creator. Now, this is a fundamental issue to the heart of who we are as a nation, because it even affects the way we treat our soldiers, where we say we leave no man behind on the battlefield. You know why we say that? Because even when that soldier is incapacitated to fight, and he no longer has a purpose for fighting within his unit, he still has worth and value, because he's a fellow soldier, a human being, and an American, and we just don't leave him on the battlefield to die. I would have a very hard time having respect for a country that treated its soldiers as disposables. And by the way, one of the reasons that I believe my leadership as president is unique is that I'm the only person who has said we ought to have a Veterans Bill of Rights, so that not only when we send people, we give them everything they need to do their jobs fully and successfully. But when they come home, we do not break our promises to them, but if it takes us tearing down every national monument and selling the pieces for souvenirs to pay for it, every benefit those veterans have been promised, they ought to have as the first fruits of the federal treasury.